You stick around, get you going.
Oh, hey. Hey, so I am here in Louisiana, Missouri, which is super confusing because is it Louisiana or Missouri? Well, it turns out it's Missouri. And it's a really tiny town in Pike County, Missouri. I think it had a little over 3,000 people in the 2010 census. So, very small town. You wouldn't think a lot would happen here. And in fact, a lot doesn't happen here. But I was here relaxing in this little motel in town, and I thought I would tell a story about something that did, in fact, happen here. The year was 1992, and 36-year-old Louise Hemphill lived around the outskirts of Louisiana, Missouri, sort of near there in Pike County, with her husband and three children who were named Luke, Janie, and Jesse. Then a man named Paul Kreutzer, who was 20 years old at the time, lived less than a quarter mile away from the Hemphill residence. He was living there with his adoptive parents. He had been paroled from prison in Illinois in May of 1992 and then returned to Pike County to live there with his family. And later that year, he actually met Louise when he went to the Hemphill residence to look at a horse that was for sale. So they were selling a horse. He went to look at it. And then in the last week of August, he was arrested again and then released in Columbia, Missouri on a charge of indecent exposure. So he had a criminal history, you could say. Which brings us to the morning of September 2nd, 1992, when Louise Hemphill's husband left for work and the two oldest children left for school. Then Louise drove her youngest child to school. Later in the morning, her brother went to the Hemphill's home. He was the last person to see her alive. So she had this custom. She did this thing. She was super organized with her to-do list. And I love to-do lists, so I get it. She would write out like all of her household tasks for the day, like everything she was going to do. And then she put like a deadline with each one, like a time that she wanted to complete it by. So by each task, she would then have a time that she wanted to get it done by, and she would cross them off one at a time. So we know her brother left sometime in the morning, and the police later found her to-do list, like the little chore chart, and the time on it on 10:30, like the chore that was associated with 10:30 had been crossed out, but the one that was listed for 11 a.m. was not. So we think that she was killed sometime in between 10:30 and 11 or after 11, but she was unable to complete the chore or cross it out because of the attack. So the same morning, Paul was observed in a number of locations near her home. So he was seen pulling in the driveway adjacent to the school, which she had driven her daughter. He visited two area schools. This seems weird to me. He visited two area schools and offered to speak to the students about the dangers of drugs and alcohol. Which, okay, fine, but that seems like a weird way to approach it. Maybe back in 1992, that was an okay thing to do, is just like go to the schools and say, hey, I'll talk about that. But that seems like now it would be like a phone call or an email or something like that to set it up in official channels. I guess things were a lot less formal. I don't know if they took him up on it, though. Then he went to Louisiana, Missouri, the town I'm now in, and bought a BB gun at 9:41 a.m. He also tried to purchase BBs for the gun, but he didn't have enough money for it, so he just bought the gun. Now, we don't know exactly what happened in the meantime, but around 4 p.m., Louisa's two daughters, Janie and Jessie, came home from school, and Jessie went upstairs, and there she found the naked body of her mother lying on the floor of her brother Luke's bedroom. Jessie immediately called her father. He came home, saw the body, and called 911. this was later, like information they gathered later. A psychologist who interviewed Paul said that he'd come to the house asking for Mr. Hemphill, and he was told that he wasn't there. So on September 2nd, he came to the door, asked for Mr. Hemphill. Mrs. Hemphill came to the door and told him that her husband was not home. So when she tried to shut the door, he apparently forced his way into the house. The officers who were investigating reported that they saw signs of sexual assault in the upstairs bedroom that was occupied by the two daughters, Jessie and Janie. They found lengths of duct tape that were wrapped around the head and foot of one of the beds, and pieces of duct tape were still found around Louise's ankles. Her clothing and a pair of sweatpants were on the floor next to the bed. Hair that was found on the sweatpants was consistent with Paul Kreutzer's hair and inconsistent with any member of the family. So it did not match any of them, but it seemed to match him, which hair evidence can be iffy, but they were able to rule out that it belonged to any of the family members. So it clearly came from somebody else, and it did seem to match him. There were blood stains on the bed cover and the sweatpants, and that matched the blood of Lisa. So DNA analysis of other bodily fluids that was found provided a genetic match with Paul Kreutzer as well. So at some point during the attack, Louise had either escaped or been released from the duct tape. The door to the master bedroom was found kicked in, and the door lock was lying on the bedroom floor. Boot prints on the door were similar in to the sole pattern that was found on Paul Kreutzer's boots that were seized after he was arrested. The Hemphills kept a .22 caliber pistol in a closet in the upstairs hall, and the ammunition was normally stored in the bathroom adjoining the master bedroom. So they'd keep the gun in the upstairs hall closet and then the ammunition in their master bath. After the murder, the officers found the weapon unloaded in the master bathroom. So it was not where it was supposed to be, but it was like as if she or someone had grabbed it out of its place in the hall closet and brought it to the bathroom where it could have been loaded. So Louise, when they examined her, she had suffered multiple injuries, like horrific injuries. She had been stabbed in the neck, opening up a jugular vein. Bloodstains and duct tape were discovered in the bathroom and master bedroom, apparently tracked in by her when she ran from the bathroom. So it said that Paul Kreutzer struck her in the head at least 3 times with a baseball bat that was kept in her son's room. Blows from the bat were so severe that they dislocated a vertebra in her neck. Brain matter was leaking from the wounds, although the head injuries would have been fatal. Like, these definitely would have killed her on her own, like on their own. They found that the immediate cause of death had been strangulation. So he apparently looped a belt around her neck and strangled her after having stabbed her and beat her with a bat. So they estimate the strangulation probably took approximately 3 to 4 minutes to complete, and she may have been conscious for 1 or 2 of these minutes. It's horrific, absolutely horrific. The bloodstained hunting knife that was kept in their kitchen was found lying on her body, and her purse was missing from the house. And to me, this seems like overkill. Like, he stabbed her, opening up a jugular vein. He beat her in the head with like severe injuries and then strangled her. That seems like overkill to me. That seems almost personal, or some kind of anger. I don't know. It's just, that's overkill. It's sickening. So Paul was apprehended on the evening of September 2nd, 1992. The officers searched his car and recovered, among other things, that items that had belonged to Louise, such as a billfold purse, a pair of gloves with human bloodstains on it, a roll of duct tape, and the BB gun that he had purchased that morning, along with a package of BBs and a receipt for their purchase. Now, that's what's weird, because it said that he tried to buy BBs and he didn't have enough money, but then it was found with BBs and the receipts. So did he then later use her money from her purse to go and buy the BBs? And what was the purpose? I don't know. I'm not really sure. Like, why do you need BBs that badly? And a BB gun? I'm confused. So they also seized his boots and $97 in cash that was found on his person. So I think this is what he would have stolen from her. So soon after they searched his car, they placed him in custody. When he was brought to trial, Paul Kreutzer claimed that he used a defense of diminished capacity, claiming that he suffered from a mental disease or defect that prevented him from acting with deliberation. So, yes, while he had murdered her, he did not plan it out, is what he was claiming. This was not first-degree murder, because he claimed that he was incapable of deliberately planning and carrying out such an act. I don't know about that. So he presented a witness who included a woman who on the night of the murder was helped by him when she was stranded on the road with a flat tire. So he was like, I'm not a bad person. Look, I didn't murder this woman. I stopped and helped her when she had a flat tire, which totally makes everything okay, because just because you don't murder one woman means you couldn't possibly have murdered the other one or had intent to murder the other one. He also called his former landlord and her daughter, who lived in the same apartment building as him for a year, to testify on his behalf. He had a psychologist that testified that he suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and borderline personality disorder as a result of past physical and emotional abuse. The jury, however, came back with a guilty verdict and a sentence of death. So all this happened in 1992, September. Paul had been born in 1972, making him only 20 years old, so he already had this criminal record, trauma. It seems like some kind of past emotional and physical abuse, PTSD, borderline personality disorder. So 20 years old, he already, I don't know what his previous arrest was for. I know he had one for indecent exposure. I don't know what the other one was for. But I do know that his defense claim of diminished capacity due to PTSD was unsuccessful, and he was actually executed by lethal injection in Missouri on April 10th of 2002. So I also thought it was interesting. He had no final words, but his final meal was a grilled ham and cheese sandwich, onion rings, cheesecake, and milk. Paul was born on February 22nd, 1972 in Arkansas. And, okay, so on April 26, 1991, he was convicted of 3 counts of burglary and 1 count of conspiracy to commit robbery in Illinois. He was sentenced to 3.5 years and was released, obviously, in May of 1992. So he served just over a year. And yeah, so this was a really dark event that happened in Louisiana, Missouri, for such a small town. It was unbelievably brutal and shocking and tragic all around. And it was something that I felt like I wanted to talk about, because I I like to get into people's motives. I want to learn more about what makes people work, and I couldn't find any of that in this. It's just sort of a mystery, which almost fascinates me more. Like, now I'm speculating what could have made him do that, and obviously, like, there's lots of reasons. Robbery, assault, you know, he had a criminal history, but it's just, it's not the kind of place where you'd think those things would happen, and it's really just very sad, and it's so unfortunate that her children had to be the ones to find her after all that. So, and it also seems like she really put up a fight. Like, she was fighting till the end, and that may have been why there was so much, like, what I would term overkill in the way he killed her, because she clearly seemed to have escaped from him at one point and went to arm herself, and that's incredible after all that she endured, that she was able to try to do that. Even though it was unsuccessful, I just think that's amazing that she was like cognizant enough, had the mental fortitude to think, okay, what can I do? You know, I'll get the gun, and she took it to the bathroom where they kept the bullets, and I think that's where, you know, maybe he caught up with her, but there was a lot going on in this case, and a lot of questions I'd still have, but I also think that it was an interesting defense that he tried to use that was unsuccessful, in that he was trying to say, oh, I am not responsible of at least a first-degree murder because I can't act with deliberation. And I'm not sure that, like, anything in those diagnoses really say you cannot act with deliberation, which is why it was struck down. But I think it's telling to me that he went to the store and went to buy BBs and didn't have enough money, and then after he had the money, then he went out and bought the BBs. And that, I mean, at least that's what I gather from what they had, because he didn't buy them, couldn't, and then he had them and the money. So that seems like a deliberate chain of events, at minimum robbery, which also included murder. But that is a case of Louise Hemphill and Paul Kreutzer.
So I'm here in Louisiana, Missouri. We're talking about the case of Louise Hemphill, and this is the town of Louisiana, Missouri. It's a really small town, as you can see, and a lot of these shops even are for rent or don't have anyone here, so that's interesting. I don't know what it looked like back in '92, but presumably not a whole lot different. I'm not sure exactly where the BB gun was purchased either.